Okay, good morning, everyone. Today, I am Dorothea Grant from the Northern Caribbean University, and today I'm going to be looking at the topic of homosexuality and the curriculum, the education curriculum, the school curriculum, homosexuality. Now, before we continue, I want to make a disclaimer that I am aware homosexuality is a sensitive topic for many persons. Many persons are easily triggered, angered, or frustrated with this topic, and so if that is your behavior or reception of a topic like this, then perhaps you should not continue viewing. I really hope you do though. And also, this presentation was created for the setting of a faith-based Seventh-Day Adventist institution, and so it will respectfully reflect the belief of this religion and this religious organization. All right, so with that being said, what are our objectives for this presentation? Firstly, we're going to discuss homosexuality. We're going to explain its history and its history of how it, crept into our school curriculum. And thirdly, we're going to highlight the pros and cons of this topic being in the curriculum. Now, first of all, you're probably wondering, if you don't know what a homosexual is, you're probably living under a rock. So I doubt you're wondering what it is. I'm sure as soon as I said the term, you know what I'm talking about, but for the sake of presentation, let's define it. Homosexuality refers to the experience of exclusive or nearly exclusive erotic preference for others of the same sex in fantasy and characteristically through realization of sexual intimacy with others of the same sex. So it can be conceptualized in three ways: through the desire, the behavior, and the identity, although it is not always congruent within one person at any one time, and so may represent a source of personal conflict. So those are the three ways that we can see homosexuality manifesting in someone: desires, behaviors, and identity. Now, just to quickly touch on some types of it so we're more knowledgeable going into the rest of this presentation, we know the acronym or the movement LGBTQ IAAP plus. So first of all, these are the types of homosexuals that we have. And we have a lesbian. A lesbian is a woman who is physically and romantically attracted to other women. So it's woman with woman, as we can see in the picture of the bathroom woman. And then we have gay. Now, gay is a term that usually refers to lesbian as well as men, but it's more reserved for the men that like other men. Enduring physical attraction, romantic or emotional attraction to people of the same sex. So you have female gays, male gays, but usually we just say lesbian and gay, right? The next thing is bisexual. We know that the prefix bi means what? Type it in the chat. The prefix bi means two. So for bisexual, this obviously means you're attracted emotionally and romantically to two genders, the same and more. Even if, bisexual people need not have had specific sexual experience to be bisexual. They need not have had any sexual experience at all to identify as bisexual. So they can be virgins, and as long as they have the sexual and romantic attraction or emotional attraction to someone of the same gender and another gender, more than one person's, then they're considered to be bisexual. Now let's talk about transgender, the T in LGBTQIA, right? So the transgender is a general term that describes people whose gender identity or their internal sense of being male, female, or something else does not match the sex that they were assigned at birth. So the identity that they choose it does not match whatever they were given at birth based on their private parts. So the term cisgender, however, describes people whose gender and gender identity align with the sex that they were assigned at birth. So in this day and age, we have things like gender versus gender identity, and sometimes they just don't match. So when it doesn't match, when the gender identity doesn't match the gender, we call that transgender. And then the Q is queer, an adjective used by some people whose sexual orientation is not exclusively heterosexual or straight. So this is an umbrella term that just covers everybody in the LGBTQ. We consider them queer. It's something that doesn't fit the norm. It's not the traditional male-female relationship, and so it's queer, right? And we have a image here of their symbol for the queer persons. Now let's look at the history of homosexuality. Homosexuality has gone through a lot. Back in the days, it was actually illegal. Homosexuality, at the time, they called it sodomy. Sodomy, based on the city in the Bible, Sodom and Gomorrah, that was destroyed for their very sinful ways. So sodomy was punishable in courts actually, and viewed as an offense to God. Now, punishments included being buried alive, being burnt alive, and they would specifically save the burning for witches and sorcerers that were also into homosexuality. All right, so this in 1290, it was called the Ecclesiastical Law. Okay, so we're making a huge jump from 1290 to 1993, but so much happened in terms of the homosexual community in that time. But in 1993, the Massachusetts, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but the Massachusetts model came into play, in which Massachusetts is the most advanced state when it comes to educational equity for LGBT people. And that despite it being largely Catholic and having a Republican governor. So in the state of Massachusetts, they are very equal and fair as it relates to LGBTQ people. Right? In 1993, Massachusetts passed a law protecting the rights of lesbians, gay, bisexual, and transgendered students in public school. And based on my research, I believe that this is where I would say it all started, because countries tend to follow America and what we see them doing. So when this model came into play in Massachusetts, where they decided to defend students that identified in this community, it kind of spinballed, and eventually we will see it affected our curriculum. So more about the history. In 2011, we now know about the LGBTQIA movement. It's not as illegal in every country. More and more countries legalized gay marriages, and so we're here where it's really just nowadays a common thing. In recent years, a movement has emphasized the need for inclusive public education to provide positive role models for students who previously lacked such opportunities. And that movement is the LGBTQIA movement. So they've been pushing for the inclusivity in public education as it relates to the curriculum. And slowly we can see that they're getting their way. Right? In 2011, California became the first state to require that the social studies curriculum include contributions of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer figures and their roles in contemporary society. Similar legislation was passed 8 years later in Colorado and New Jersey. So what this information is telling us is that generally, when trends are set, and other countries will follow. So we find that in California, they started to push it and legalize it in the social studies curriculum, and Colorado and New Jersey eventually followed. So I believe this is also an important date or year to note in the whole introduction of homosexuality in the curriculum. The LGBTQIA movement is pushing it, and in 2011 it was a big year for them with the school curriculum. The next thing is in 2019, Henry and Edward versus Jamaica case. I'm not sure if you have heard about it, but the commission in Gareth Henry and Simon Edwards versus Jamaica found Jamaica's laws criminalizing same-sex sexual activity violate international law and the rights of LGBT people. So I threw this in here because it really relates to us as Jamaicans. So the commission recommended the repeal of the criminalizing provisions and that reparations should be made to the applicants. The commission recommended that the anti-discrimination legislation should be adopted, hate crimes against LGBT people should be monitored, and LGBT training or education should be provided for public officials and school children. So I believe this is also an important date in the whole history of homosexuality in the curriculum, because this case, the Henry and Edwards versus Jamaica case, it got the commission or the governing people to really be able to push a lot of policies related to the LGBT movement into the Jamaican policies, right? So they were supposed to monitor hate crimes against gay persons, and we know that Jamaica is considered to be a very homophobic society, as we are largely Christians. So we can see, but this case really started a shift in Jamaica as well, because the shift was going on long before this, but it started a shift in our policies because the commission now obligated schools to start educating children, for us to monitor hate crimes, for us to be anti-discrimination against LGBT people, and for public officials to be trained as it relates to homosexuality. So just to bring it home a little, this date is also important to note, and you can go ahead and do some research on this case. It's very interesting, but I don't have enough time to share. All right, so let's move into the how of it all. How is homosexuality moving into the curriculum? So more and more the topic of homosexuality is being integrated into the curriculum of all educational structures, from daycare to university. From baby, we can find the cartoons having it that they watch at daycares, all the way to university. I'm here discussing homosexuality with us, so that's a prime example. This is done through many methods. I'm going to discuss 4 with the short time that I have left. Firstly, we have diversity check boxes. 2, the whole issue of representation. 3, the changes in the policy, like we mentioned an example earlier with the Edward versus Jamaica case, right? And then 4, we have shifts that are happening in the curriculum. So let's start with diversity check boxes. Okay, so essentially a diversity checkbox, we realize that nowadays shows the most time will include a black person, for example, an Asian person, because persons are always fighting for diversity in cinema, fighting for diversity in books. You want to see yourself represented. Persons are fighting to see themselves be represented. And so that causes the diversity checkbox, where writers and teachers will try to include everybody in their work or their piece of literature. So checkbox diversity holds teams and large organizations accountable for fair hiring practices and helps identify diversity issues. So women, for example, is like a thing that you want to check off when you're having an organization, because women for years have fought for an opportunity to work. So you want to check that off. Then we have black persons, Asian persons, Latin persons, females, and of course the LGBTQIA persons. For years it was a whole illegal thing, and now they want to be represented in everything, and that diversity checkbox must be ticked. Okay, so nextly, I'll give an example, right? Similar to the absence of diverse role models in academic subjects is the dearth of inclusive sexual health education relevant to LGBTQ students in public education. So this is a way that we can see creeping in. This paradigm is what they look through to say, okay, sex health, we need to be inclusive in our sex health education, because honestly, adolescents are trying things, and the more we hear about homosexuality, the more teenagers want to explore. And so educating them in the sex health is a way that they kind of have crept into the curriculum, the concept of homosexuality. According to William Institute survey conducted in September 22, 9.54% of American youth ages 13 to 17 identify as LGBTQ. So this is America, yes. 9.54 might sound like a small number, but it's really close to 10%, and that's a good amount of adolescents. So they want to be represented. And so you know how we as teachers will write examples, and we want all our students to feel included when we give examples. So we might use their name, or we might use their culture if we have a foreign student in the examples that we present in the class. Now in our examples, they desire for us to include LGBTQ examples. When we're telling stories, they want us to use LGBTQ persons as well, so that students can feel included. So we diversify our content as teachers. That is the desire, right? Number 2 is representation, as I'm running out of time. Representation refers to the basic idea that if students see people like themselves reflected in the course materials, then they are more likely to identify and imagine themselves as belonging in the field. So that's important. Representation is a big deal nowadays. And it really ties over into the diversity checkboxing that we just discussed, so I won't go too deeply into it. But a study by Gates 2011 suggested that approximately 9 million Americans identify as lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender. Then we talk about changes to policy, right? Policies, we discuss policies in class, in curriculum development. Policies are changing, especially as it relates to the curriculum. So one of the most alarming things, we talked about the Massachusetts model, right, is that it requires that 36 institutions that are accredited to certify teachers demonstrate to the State Department of Education that their graduates are sensitive to sexual orientation issues. So at these institutions, and I'm sure eventually other states and other countries are going to follow this element of being able to qualify to be a teacher, right? But the teachers, before they can graduate, have to display sensitivity to issues of homosexuality, of sexual orientation. These things must be displayed before they can become certified. So the next thing we're looking at is, of course, the shifts in the curriculum. And instead of going too deep into it, as I am out of time, let's talk about the LGBTQ plus curriculum bill. The core purpose of the LGBTQ inclusive curriculum bill is to ensure that LGBTQ and questioning persons' contributions are incorporated into curriculum and history classes. So that is what the curriculum bill is all about. And here's a fun fact: a little more than half of educators believe that they should be teaching about LGBTQ topics, according to the recent Education Week poll. So more and more teachers are no longer fighting this thing out, this concept or discussion out of the curriculum. They're like, yeah, let's teach it. So maybe you're wondering, what's the pros and cons of teaching it? Should I be on the side of, yeah, let's teach it in the curriculum? And type it in the chat. Are you for teaching homosexuality in the curriculum, or are you against the idea? I don't know, but after I present the pros and cons, you can decide what side you're on as it relates to homosexuality being included in the curriculum, because it really is a big conflict, and that's the first con. Homosexuality being included in the curriculum has led to an international conflict that the introduction of homosexuality in science courses, history, we talked about social studies, have caused between conservatives and non-conservatives. So we know about that conflict there. But a pro is that if it's there, if homosexuality is in the curriculum, students will be more widely knowledgeable, right? They're more aware of current affairs and issues related to this topic. So that's a pro. If you want your students to be widely knowledgeable, it's a topic that's out there and hot right now. So I don't know. But there's another pro. Students will develop sensitivity to others by being aware of their experiences. The reality is, as Christians, we should be doing things in love. And so students being aware and not ignorant will develop some amount of sensitivity, and they can be taught on how to relate to persons who've experienced trauma or things of that sort due to their sexual orientation. So then we have a con, which is that young children are being exposed to sexual themes and sexuality. As a result, many make decisions related to their gender and orientation from this young age, where they haven't even really fully grasped what sexuality is. But they're making decisions because it's such a hot topic that teachers are somewhat forcing on students. Another pro is that students will know how to operate in international spaces, right? They would be made aware of the laws and norms in different countries. So when they travel, they're aware of what's going on, what's illegal where they are, what's not illegal as it relates to homosexuality. And it makes them more marketable when they're just more knowledgeable. But a con is that the rights of parents are being taken away. We've heard many stories of parents sending their children to school, and teachers dressing the male students, for example, in dresses. Because they're like, you can be a girl if you want to. So parents are losing that right of teaching their children their own standard of morality, because teachers are trying to be like, you can be who you want to be, whatever gender you want to be, and it takes that right from the parents. Another pro though is that students can be taught of the moral expectations within romantic relationships and become aware of their bodies and sexuality and how to protect themselves from undesired behaviors or attention. So with students, it all comes down to just being aware. Having it in the curriculum will make students aware. They're aware of their bodies, they're aware of sexuality, they're aware that, yes, I'm a girl, she's a girl, but persons tend to have those types of desires, so I should be cautious in how I interact in this relationship. You understand? So another con is the concern of the rise in youth experiencing gender dysphoria and seeking harmful gender-affirming treatments. Gender dysphoria is a whole other topic, but it's being found that more and more children and youth are experiencing gender dysphoria. And I believe that this is because they're just getting too much information overload as it relates to sex and gender from a younger and younger age. So it leaves them confused, right? And so let's talk about, of course, what the Bible has to say on the matter. I did say at the start that this is a faith-based classroom, and so we're going to bring Bible into it. Firstly, Proverbs 22 verse 6 says, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he's old, he'll not depart from it. Whatever training you give to a child a child will be the training that sticks. So if you're going to be telling a child from he or she is young that they can be the opposite gender of what they were assigned at birth, it is going to stick throughout their adulthood and all of their lives, and they're going to pass it to their children. Whatever training you give to a child sticks. The Bible also says in Isaiah that all your children shall be taught by the Lord, and great shall be the peace of your children. So the Lord is the person who should be teaching, right? Whenever we as teachers step into the classroom, let the Lord take over. And we should, in that case, be teaching the principles of the Lord and the principles of the Bible. Leviticus 18 verse 22 is clear on the matter on how the Bible feels about homosexuality. It says, do not practice it. Having sex with another man as with a woman is a detestable sin. I don't need to expound on this text, but if you're wondering as a teacher, if you just have any questions, this text is clear. It is a detestable sin. If a man has sexual relations with a man as one does with a woman, both of them have done what is detestable. They are to be put to death. Their blood will be on their own heads. Leviticus 20 verse 13. As I said, will not expound on the Bible scriptures because they are clear in what they're saying, and it is for you now to go ahead and pray about it and decide your stance on the matter. So as I said before, tell us in the chat after all I've presented, are you for homosexuality being in the curriculum or are you against it? I'm very genuinely curious. Like, what's your stance as a teacher of homosexuality being in the curriculum? If you're presented with homosexuality in your curriculum at the school you attend, will you ignore it? Will you jump over it, or will you actually go ahead and teach the topic? Because I'm here essentially teaching the topic of homosexuality now. So what would you do if you're given it in your curriculum? Now I found this nice text as I close, not a text, a passage from Ellen G. White. Indulgence in unlawful things has become a power to deprave mankind, to dwarf the mind, and to pervert the faculties. As teachers, it is our job to do the very opposite, right? We want to build minds and build mental faculties. So indulgence in sinful things or just giving into sinful things is actually depraving minds. Such a state of things as exist today existed before the flood and before the destruction of Sodom. So Noah's Ark and Sodom and Gomorrah time, we're almost living in that exact type of state of the world, right? Before God destroyed them. Dissipation is one of the increase in our world. Handbills on which the indecent pictures are printed are posted up along our streets to allure the eyes and deprave the morals. In other words, we can see sin everywhere, printed, bolded in our faces. These presentations are of such character as to stir up the basest passions of the human heart through corrupt imaginings. These corrupt imaginings are followed by defiling practices like those in which the Sodomites indulged. Essentially, she's comparing our world to the world of the Sodomites, right? Before God destroyed them, right? But the most terrible part of the evil is that it is practiced under the garb of sanctity. Our youth will be defiled, their thoughts degraded, and their souls polluted unless they are barricaded with the truth. That line essentially is my opinion on the matter, right? What we as teachers in training and what we as teachers have to do is to present the truth. So when teaching, if we're given this in our curriculum, as I said, it's up to you and your stance. But if you're going to choose to present it in the truth of the Bible and the truth of the biblical principles. For example, what I've done now, to include scriptures, include quotes that really back the Bible and Jesus' opinion on the matter of homosexuality. So it's just to close and give a closing word. Nowadays in our society, so many things are going to be introduced into our curriculum. You're going to be questioned, and your job might be called into question if you refuse to do certain things. And I believe that that's what this whole idea of this unit is: issues in the curriculum. What will your stance be? Think about it from now. You have to have your moral footing grounded from now, because when you get into the classroom, you're probably going to be asked to do things that you do not stand for. How will you approach it? What will you stand for? Are you ready to lose your job for the point that you believe in? Think about it. And that is my presentation on homosexuality in the curriculum. We went through the history of it, we defined it, we went through the history of it, saw how it slowly got introduced into the curriculum, and even more specifically into Jamaican and our policies. We discussed the diversity checkboxes, representation. We discussed the changes in policies with teachers needing to demonstrate sensitivity to the issue of sexual orientation in order to be accredited. And finally, we discussed pros and cons, how the scripture views it, and how Ellen White sees indulgence in unlawful things and how it affects the mind. So it is possibly damaging. So I'm Dorothea Grant. Thank you for listening. Have a good afternoon.